What's going on, guys? Andrew Piluk Hockey here, back with another video, and you guys can see the title. This is my Toronto Maple Leafs NHL trade deadline preview for 2020. Let's see if something happens. I mean, I could be recording this video right now and something happens. I could post this video and something happens, and this whole video would be a wash. But if you're watching this right now and some of the names discussed haven't been moved, then that's a miracle at this point, because every time I record, something happens. But anyways, it's no secret that the Toronto Maple Leafs have been active on the phones. It's been reported by a bunch of really good sources, of course, by Bob McKenzie, Elliot Friedman, Chris Johnson, Pierre LeBrun. Everybody's saying that the phones are active. Kyle Dubas is making calls. But will that result in a trade? Now, we can't confirm or deny that because we're not in that room. We have no idea. Until these insiders or the Leafs officially make a move, we won't know. So until then, let's just talk about who we could be going after, and two, what names are available for the Toronto Maple Leafs to get rid of. Who are the guys that are trade pieces? Now, there's been a lot of talk over the last couple weeks of big names, of course. Everybody wants that big right-handed shot defenseman, or at least a left-handed shot who is very good defensively that would immensely improve this team. And that's something that I think Leaf fans need to remember. Kyle Dubas said he would only make a move if it moved the needle for his team. Now, also keep in mind, it would have been a lot easier for the Leafs to make a move by now if Andreas Johnsson wasn't hurt. He still could be moved, but it would likely be to a team that's rebuilding and would use him in the coming years. And there's not a ton of teams right now that I can actually say might take a shot on Andreas Johnsson, because he struggled a lot of times this year. And I don't know if maybe some teams find him as a guy that might be just a piece in a deal, not really a centerpiece, because the Leafs need to find one piece on their team that could make a trade significant. And that's why a lot of people are bringing up Kasperi Kapanen. Now, that's the first guy I'll talk about. It is very possible, but Kapanen does a lot of really good things for this Maple Leafs team. And the only way that I would have, sorry, I've got the points in front of me, but the only way that I would have made the move is if, Johnsson was still, playing right now and was putting up points and was looking good. I personally would trade Johnsson over Kapanen, which still could be a possibility, but we've seen Kapanen the other night. He's starting to show some of that toughness. He'll stick up and fight for his teammates like he did with Rasmus Sandin. He does pretty well for himself. He's fast. He can play on the penalty kill. He can play on that second power play unit. And I think a lot of people are undervaluing him. I think that he's actually quite significant to this Leafs team when he's on his game. Sometimes he gets lost out there when he's just skating back and forth and showing off his speed. That's great and all, but you need to kind of do something with it. And he has one breakaway move and it only works sometimes, and that's just to shoot the puck and hope that it goes in. And he has a pretty good shot. But anyways, this year for Kasperi Kapanen, 61 games played, 33 points. 12 goals, 21 assists. Now, pretty decent numbers. I'm sure he'd like to have better numbers than that, but he's a guy that the Leafs could move on from if it meant getting a big defenseman back. But again, that leaves a hole on that side for another winger that would have to step up. Mikheyev, I know a lot of people think that he's close, but he's still over a month away. He's still over a month away, and you can't guarantee when he comes back that he's going to be the same. I think that there's a good chance that the Leafs might want to shut Mikheyev down. I don't really know if they're that, excited to force him to come back to play that quickly, especially with an injury that serious. Guys, that can result in death if you hit the wrong spot. It's bad to get cut like that. So I don't really know if the Leafs want to pressure him to be using that wrist so much that quick. People seem to think he's close to coming back. He's for sure not close to coming back. So I don't know what the Leafs want to do there, but Kapanen's definitely an option. Another guy that I mentioned, Andreas Johnsson, 21 points in 21 points in 43 games played. He's not been his regular self. Now, the same thing goes as Kapanen. I would rather the Leafs find a way to package a defenseman like Tyson Barrie, or, hear me out, Travis Dermott, to go after another defenseman, because their offensive firepower is what's keeping this team alive. You know what I mean? And Johnsson shut down for the year, so I guess technically if you wanted to move him, he's not coming back this year. If you wanted to move on from him and put him into a package so that way you can find a way to get that defenseman, technically he's not going to play for the Leafs this year anyway. So if a team's looking for him for the future and say, yeah, this guy scored 20 goals before, we like what he does and he'd fit better with our squad, then maybe they have him as part of a deal. But I happen to really like Andreas Johnsson. I think his deal is pretty fair. He's just having a bit of a rough year, and of course the injuries. He just had surgery. Get better soon to Mango. I hope that he gets better, but he is definitely a trade option. Just so I can wrap up the forwards, I think that people think Kerfoot is an option. I really like him at the third center spot. He looks way better than he does on the wing. Like, we've seen that in literally one game, their last game against Pittsburgh, depending on when you're watching this. He looks much better as a centerman, and that's what he was brought here to do. He has 26 points in 57 games played. If he stays at center, he looks much better than he has as of late. But because of injuries and swapping the lineups around, the Leafs have had to have Kerfoot up on the wing. Much better as a centerman. Keep Engvall on the wing. Keep those guys spread out. I really like having Kerfoot as that third-line centerman. But, again, I'd rather lose a Kerfoot than a Kapanen. So if that deal has to happen, hopefully the Leafs can find a way to maneuver their lineup to keep their depth proper, because I think Kerfoot looks really good as a 3C, and he actually fits really well there in terms of a league-wide. He's got to be one of the better third-line centermen in the league. Next is Jeremy Bracco. I think that he would just be a piece in a deal. I think if you asked a year or so ago if Jeremy Bracco gets you more, he probably does. I think teams are kind of realizing that he's just like a power play specialist. He puts up a bunch of points because, on the power play he's pretty dangerous. He doesn't score a ton. He's not exactly big. There's a lot of teams that just, want a bigger guy. He's a smaller guy. So Jeremy Bracco, for sure, I think that as a part of a deal, as a sweetener for a maybe prospect, he's probably going to go there. I've really toned down on Jeremy Bracco being a big piece in a trade because he's not. Like, we have to realize that Jeremy Bracco is just a piece. If there was a big trade, he would just be an additional piece to sweeten a deal. Again, the Leafs have to figure out a way to get creative here, and that's why I have to bring up the defenseman. Now, hear me out. There's been some talk lately about Tyson Barrie. There's a good and a bad side to this. Good is that he's an unrestricted free agent. You got him for $2.5 million. He was part of a big trade. So he's going to be, like, you could trade him to a team that doesn't have a lot of cap space. He's at $2.5 million. Colorado is holding on to 50% of his salary. So if you trade a guy like Tyson Barrie, teams don't have to shed too much salary. So you don't have to take on a bad contract. And the Leafs can't do that, by the way. So Frank Saravelli from TSN believes that the Vancouver Canucks, the Vegas Golden Knights, Calgary Flames, and Carolina Hurricanes have all been in on Tyson Barrie. Now, hear me out. Vancouver, they don't have anything that the Leafs need. I'm sorry, Tanev, he's really good defensively. The Canucks want to keep him because he's actually been staying healthy, and that's the problem. If he gets injured, he's likely done for the year. He's a Band-Aid. I really like him defensively, but he's not going to get that deal done. The Leafs aren't interested in a guy that could get hurt stubbing his toe on the way into the arena. He's very injury-prone. The Vegas Golden Knights, they've been making moves. They just got rid of Cody Eakin. They have space for him probably to come in there. I don't know how big of an impact they want to make on their picks or their prospects, because the Leafs want guys that they can either flip to another team immediately, which they would have to have a deal in place with another team, pretty much right after, because if they lose out on a defenseman, they'll look really stupid. And I'll get to that in a second. Calgary, a lot of people are saying that we should get Brody. It should be a one-for-one swap, but TJ Brody actually has the Leafs on his no-trade list now. Apparently, after the Kadri deal was nixed and he knew that the Leafs were gunning after him, he put the Toronto Maple Leafs on his no-trade list, and he will refuse a trade to Toronto. Again, that's just been reported. I'm not an insider, but that's been reported, so I don't think that's going to work. And then Carolina, maybe they try to send Gardner back the other way, because if you look at, I think people need to understand, if you look at Gardner's numbers in Toronto, he was better in the last 3 years than Morgan Riley defensively, and he had similar numbers to Riley offensively for a little bit there, and then Riley took off. So don't just, crap all over what Gardner did in Toronto, because it honestly doesn't make a ton of sense. Would the Leafs want to do this deal? I don't think so, but the Leafs need a guy that's very good defensively. Gardner's not that. He's decent defensively, but he's good offensively, and he's been struggling this year. He's got a cheap contract. I just don't think a trade with Carolina would work out. So I'm not sure what's going to happen, but because the Leafs have a bit of cap space in terms of they have Andreas Johnsson on LTIR, so the Leafs have like over $3 million in space, and depending on what happens with Cody Ceci, he might be done for the year too, or at least done to the playoffs. And since there's no cap space in the playoffs, Cody Ceci might be just stuck on LTIR. The Leafs could have a ton of money to work with here. So if they're able to flip Barrie, get some picks and prospects, and then make another trade to bring in a big guy, sure, that makes a ton of sense to me, because Tyson Barrie probably gets you a second-round pick plus. Like, people need to look at this market and understand that Tyson Barrie has been chewing up huge minutes lately. His Corsi is over 50%. He's playing decent defensively. He's made some blunders, but he actually has had a really good year in terms of points since Babcock has left too. Like right now, Barrie leads defenseman on the Leafs with 33 in 62 games. 33 points. And this is pretty much most of it coming after Babcock was fired like 30-something games in. So we can't sit here and say Tyson Barrie's been awful, because he's been, taking all of the offensive load off of the shoulders of Morgan Rielly. He's had to take that all on. So he's been doing decent. I'd really like to see the Leafs just load up a ton of guys on the blue line, but they can't. One of those guys is going to go, and that's why it could also be Travis Dermott. Dermott's been struggling. He's a restricted free agent. If he stays with the Leafs, he's likely going to sign a one-year prove-yourself contract, because with the injuries and his struggle in play, there's no way this guy is going to deserve decent money. That's the reason why Justin Hall's been signed, because even though he's had a couple bad games, Justin Hall and Jake Muzzin have been the best Leafs defensemen all year in terms of defensive ability. So Hall got the contract, Dermott didn't. Injuries, he's got 11 points in 48 games played, but he's still a piece that can improve, and we've seen how good he's been in the past. So there's a chance Dermott gets moved in a deal to acquire assets, to make a trade like a flip trade, or to acquire a defensive defenseman or defensive prospect. I don't know what they're going to do, but there's a ton of options when it comes to flipping Barrie or Dermott, and hope that you can get a guy that plays that defensive Muzzin or Hall type of game, although Muzzin's been the Leafs' best defenseman since he's been acquired. So with all that in mind, people have brought up some names like Matt Dumba. Matt Dumba is worse offensively right now than Tyson Barrie, and he's also not very good defensively. People say, shiny guy, put up points before, throws hits. Boom, he must be amazing. Right-handed shot. No. Jonas Brodin from the Minnesota Wild, now we're talking. Defensive style, much better style of game for the Leafs, higher acquisition cost. It'll cost you much more to get Brodin than it would Dumba. I believe Brodin's locked up in a contract right now too. So the Leafs would have to make that work cap-wise, but they would also have to pay more for him. So Matt Dumba, no, I don't think that's in the cards. In terms of the New Jersey Devils, you have Severson or Severson, however you say his name. I say Severson. And you also have Vatanen. Sammy Vatanen's not the best defensively, but offensively he's pretty good. So again, if you're looking for that home run defensive type of guy, it's not him. Severson is better defensively in my eyes from what I've seen and the numbers I've seen. So if you're going after him, again, high acquisition cost, you can make that deal, but I don't think the Devils want to let him go. The big name that everybody wants the Leafs to go after, Josh Manson, that would be huge. But again, you're going to pay so much to get him out of there. The only way you get him is if you're attaching a good prospect, two probably really good picks, and then a conditional pick, and then maybe a Kapanen or Johnsson. Like, you're going to have to pay out the ass for this guy. And Anaheim has said many times that they are not interested in trading him. They believe that he's part of the solution and that a deal won't happen unless they're blown away, just knocked out of the park with an amazing deal. So I don't know what you guys are thinking. I don't know what the Leafs are thinking. We're just here talking about the Leafs and hoping that they do something. I want to see a defensive trade as well, just like you guys. So if you're new to this channel, make sure to subscribe. I'd really appreciate it. Join the squad. We just hit over 7K. Thank you guys so much. So let's get to 8K, 9K, 10K, anything. But I appreciate you guys. Let's see what the Leafs do. And by the time I upload this, they might make a move and I'll look really dumb. Peace.